the River Restoration Manager of the Eden Rivers Trust. I first met Lev a couple of years ago when he was giving a talk in Ullswater Valley, which is the valley where I live, on a new project that had been set up by Eden Rivers Trust to put some wiggles into the Ullswater Beck to try to reduce the flow of water during flooding times and also to encourage wildlife to come back to the valley. He gave a very good presentation, and I'm very familiar with the expertise and the knowledge of Eden Rivers Trust and their outreach, not only in this valley and elsewhere. And I thought it would be very interesting if he could come and explain the sort of things they're doing in this valley and elsewhere. Lev's had quite an interesting background. I don't know as much of it as I would like. I hope he will say a few words just before he plunges into his talk. But he's been a passionate employee of Eden Rivers Trust, I think for 5 years, something of that sort. Built up a great track record, and I see he's brought along some of his colleagues, volunteers with him to give him moral and physical support. With no further ado, I will pass the floor to you, Lev, and you're going to talk on the Eden Rivers Trust river restoration across the ages, the Ullswater Valley and beyond. So, Lev, thank you very much indeed for coming today, and we look forward to hearing your jewels of wisdom on river restoration. Thank you.
You might be out of luck there. No, thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Thanks everyone for coming. So as Tim said, I've been at Eden Rivers Trust for just coming up for 5 years now. Been the river restoration manager there, looking after the Eden part of the company river restoration strategy, which I'll talk about in a little while. Before that, I was working on restoration of chalk streams down in Wiltshire, working with Wiltshire Wildlife Trust. Again, equally beautiful and fascinating river systems, at the same time similar and totally different to what we have up here. So that was really interesting. And I basically got into this line of work because when I was younger, I worked in jobs that I hated for many, many years, and got to a point that I couldn't do it anymore, and I was making my wife's life a misery and my own life, and I had to do something about it. And I went and I retrained, and I knew I wanted to do something related to rivers and conservation because that's just where my passion's always been. And so, yeah, so I went and I studied conservation, well, environmental management at university, and then was lucky enough to get into what I think is probably the best job in the world. So, you know, but I'm biased because it's my job. So tonight I'm just going to talk a little bit about, well, I'm going to start talking about Eden Rivers Trust and the Eden catchment. So who we are, what the Eden catchment is, etc. And then I'm just going to go through a few examples of projects that we've done over the years. Some from before my time at Eden Rivers Trust, and some from since I've been here. I'm not really going to be talking much about the future here for a number of different reasons, but I will talk a little bit about aspirations and things that we would like to do. And then we'll throw it open to questions, and we'll see where we go from there. If that's all right with everyone. Okay, so oh look, I forgot to change the slide already. Come on. No. Right. My computer. Oh, that was good. Right, let's try that again. It's just a bit slow. There we go. So that's the bit I've just told you all. So yeah, Eden Rivers Trust. So we're a small environmental charity. We were formed in 1996, and it was off the back of a major pollution incident on the River Eden. There was some pesticides made it into the watercourse, basically killed off the river entirely for miles and miles. And the money that was levied to clean that up and sort of so I think it says there compensation, but actually that's a bit of a simplification. So it wasn't compensation, I am reliably informed. Whatever it was, it led to £200,000 being given to form an organisation to look after the Eden catchment. And that's where the Eden Rivers Trust comes along. So the Eden catchment itself, it's about 850 square miles in area, which I did the calculation earlier. I think that's somewhere 2,200 kilometers squared to anybody who works in, metric. Runs from 80 miles, runs from south to north, which it must have taken me at least 3 years to get used to. North flowing rivers just aren't natural. That's fine. Shouldn't say I'm natural. They are natural. They're just not right. No. And it rises in Malastang, basically, and goes all the way out to the Solway Firth. I'm sure you all guys know the Eden catchment better or as well as I do. But it's a really important and interesting river system. It's mostly designated SSSI and SAC. And that is for the interesting wildlife it has. So everything from white-clawed crayfish and Atlantic salmon, eels, otters, my personal favorites, lamprey, which are, if you've never seen a lamprey, they're an amazing fish that's basically been pretty much unchanged for longer than the human race has been around. So fascinating things. We also have 2 national parks, 2 areas of outstanding natural beauty, 16 special areas of conservation, and that's all outside of the Eden catchment. And that's just the Eden catchment. This is not Cumbria as a whole. We're just talking about one catchment. So, it's really varied and interesting. Now, I'm not going to go into the geology when we talk about varied, but that is also incredibly varied, and that really impacts on everything else that's there, the wildlife and everything. Basically, we knew we had an important river system, but it was getting worse and worse. It's been getting worse for years, worse for wildlife, worse for people. Don't get me wrong, it's still probably one of the better river catchments in the country. But, it was like all of our rivers sadly declining. In 2010, the Cumbrian River Restoration Strategy was formed. And this was aimed at looking after all of Cumbria's protected rivers. So it's a partnership led by the Environment Agency and National England, but with National Trust, RSPB, the Three Rivers Trust, Ullswater CIC, and I know I'm going to forget and offend somebody. I'm really trying not to. There are also loads of sort of other slightly wider partners as well. So councils, Lake District National Park Authority, Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority. It's a really quite a large partnership, and and one of them will be watching this and then probably tell me off later. So sorry if I have missed you out. And basically, they commissioned consultants, Jacobs, to do a study, a walkover study of all the rivers, all of the SSSI, SAC rivers. So that's, sorry, for those who don't know, that's sites of special scientific interest and special areas of conservation. So one is a UK designation, the other one is a European designation. So it's both nationally and internationally important. And so Jacobs looked at and prioritized all of the river systems, or all the ones that they could access and actually do any work on, and came up with a priority, a strategy, I should say, that showed where we should be working and how. And that developed into our future projects. So one of the first major remeandering projects, certainly that we did, was Thrimley Hall. So this is on the River Lee, which, if anybody doesn't know, it kind of runs from just north of Shap, all the way through down to Melkinthorpe, and then joins the Lyde Bennett downstream from there. Prior to this project, most of our work had been sort of fencing, tree planting, bank protection, all good stuff. But this, on the back of the Cumbrian River Restoration Strategy, this was a bit of a step change. And we started to do more ambitious work. So the project that you can see on the screen there In fact, this is one of my over to the wall bit, and I'll talk about another one later. This back here is the West Coast Main Line Railway. Then you've got the River Leaf, or the old River Leaf, that would have run in a line directly next to it. And here's where you have the new river channel that was created. So the reason being, sort of one of the biggest problems that our rivers face is the fact that we have taken out all of the habitat. We've straightened them and we've made them more uniform and we've pushed into the edge of the floodplain. And there was a good reason for that. The idea was to drain the land more so that we could get more livestock on there. A lot of this happened post-World War II, but actually it's been going on for, yeah, I'm not going to put a number on it, but certainly I know, for example, across the UK during the Napoleonic Wars, we had a lot of prisoners of war over here who were doing this kind of work. They were straightening rivers, they were reinforcing them, things like that. And I would say, to be honest, it's probably better than getting shot at with a musket. So, you know, I'd have done the same. But what that's done is that speeds water up. It means it takes a lot less time for water to get from one point to the next, which, as well as the increases in flood risk that brings, so when water comes faster to a pinch point, as it inevitably does, it then backs up and spills out where you don't want it to. But also, once it is fast flowing and straight, it's very hard to get any deposition in there. So you need various gravel and different habitats in that river for all the wildlife. And if you've got a very straight, fast flowing river channel, you only ever end up with one size of gravel or cobble in there, and therefore a lack of varied habitat, and therefore a lack of varied wildlife to go with it. So we start thinking, well, how do we get this habitat back? We start putting bends in rivers, we start putting habitats back in and starting those natural processes again. And so this was, as I say, for us, the first one of its kind, I believe, and we put those meanders in. Now, this was designed by Eden Rivers Trust and the Environment Agency. And I've got to be honest, it was a very simple design because it's not in this presentation, but basically every time it rained, where the water would go is follow exactly that line that you can see the river channel on that. That's because it was what we call a paleo channel. It was the historic route of the river that was still visible on the landscape and was still the preferential path for water whenever it came out of the channel. So it's fairly obvious where the river needed to go back to. We put it back there, and yeah, 13 years on, this is still going strong. It's got great wildlife using it. The farmer is happy with it. He can still farm there. We put the bridge in for him so he can still farm both sides. And yeah, and that kind of emboldened us. So we got bigger and braver, and we went on to do even better projects. So Barnskew, this was on the River Livenet in 2014, and I know a few of you in here have been there, I think. And again, this was 2 straightened river channels. And again, I'm going to have to go over here, I'm afraid. Hopefully you can still see me. So we have this one here, the red dotted one that you can see goes straight up there. So this is the Halbeck, which goes up there, and this is the Livenet here, and they join together there. Used to be joined together there, and then go straight up as a Livenet in very straight lines. As you can see here, we've re-meandered both of these bits, changed all that up there, and by doing so, we increased the length of the river from sort of 1,500 meters to 1,900 meters. Doesn't sound a lot, but actually, as well as it being 400 meters longer, the amount of additional habitat that created, every meander has pools and riffles and bars. It's got woody material in the channel, which is essential for fish. And for invertebrates and a lot of other things for that. So, you know, it's been a really dynamic and interesting restoration, and it's one of our best spawning habitats as far as we're aware for Atlantic salmon, and it's also teeming in white-clawed crayfish. So, you know, as far as we're aware at the moment, it's doing a brilliant job. Actually, I'm going out there next week, so I'll take some more photos. Next time I get this talk, I'll be able to update it. But yeah. So from then on, things kind of rolled onwards and upwards. there was a bit of a gap there. There were other projects happening in that time. I just wasn't around, but there were projects happening across the Lie Bennett and the Leith mainly, and I think where else there was any. Records are a bit scarce. So I'm going to jump forward to when I came along because I know about these ones. And one of the first projects I delivered was at Racer Gill, so Matterdale on James Rebank's farm. And again, quite a simple project. We took a very straight river channel, which I can't see on there, but it would have run, or used to run across the back of that field there. And it was about that wide and about that, well, no, about that deep, and just the straightest thing you can possibly imagine. It's like the engineers actually used a spirit level all the way along just to make sure there weren't any bends in. And so, yeah, James had been working with Eden Rivers Trust in the past on various fencing and planting schemes, and basically, well, why don't we restore your river? And he was up for it, so we did that. And basically, again, we just strained it, took the straight channel and meandered it, increased its length again by something like 200 to 300 meters, and created loads of different habitat in there. So you can see there's a little mid-channel bar in the middle there, and it spreads out, so you've got a riffle forming and you've got pools in there. And you know, we have been back and electrofished it, and there are now salmon in there and trout and lamprey, and it's a really nice bit of river. So hopefully going to be able to go back there and electrofish it again this year, see how it's changed. Back on the River Leith. So I was talking to you about this one earlier. Thrimby Grange. So this is just upstream of the Thrimby project, our first project that we talked about. And this one is a kilometre of river with a farm in the middle. So as you can see the farmhouse in the middle. Again, we've got that very straight line, which is the West Coast Main Line. And next to that, the very straight line, which is the River Leith. Again, it's so straight, so it wasn't totally featureless because there's a lot of bedrock in there. And so these bedrock steps were creating some habitat. Upstream, it was a bit less, there was more plants, less bedrock, and very little going on. And so this one was obviously a bit more complicated than I would have been happy to design at home, because there's a farm in the middle of it that already flooded whenever floods got bad, and I was not going to be the person that made that worse. So we hired consultants to do some modelling and some design work for us, a company called Dynamic Rivers, who do an excellent job, and they came up with some designs for this, which included re-meandering the upstream end, which is the bottom part on the picture on the that one, right? Interestingly, so the top half is the bedrock half and the bottom half isn't. And the bottom half was nice and easy. We put the channel back where it wanted to be, where it was supposed to be. The downstream half, unfortunately, the river wanted to be on the other side of the roadway, and Network Rail weren't going to let us do that. To be honest, I didn't ask because I didn't want to do that. So what we had to do was dig an entirely new but natural route for it. So something that, something that would have those habitats and features and would naturalize in time. What that actually meant was us having to dig out 400 meters of bedrock down to several meters deep. So it turned out that most of that upstream, downstream section, top section, was limestone bedrock, and it took a man on a digger about 3 weeks just constantly peckering at it with an attachment on his digger, and then transporting it out so that we could create this actually quite nice meandering channel that we have here now. So as you can see, that's all bedrock through there. Down the bottom end, actually, we get quite a nice deep gorge now, and yeah, you can actually, if anybody knows the area, if you're going from the A6 to Little Strickland, there's a road with a bridge that goes over the railway, and if you look right, you can see up the canyon there. And it's really interesting, unique bit of habitat. Actually, there's Open Farm Sunday there next week, and also I'm giving a guided walk there the week after. So if anybody wants to see it, feel free to sign up. So that's approximately a kilometre of river restored, 800 trees planted, several ponds and backwaters also included in that. I should say I went past it on the train the other day, and absolutely teeming in water crowfoot as well, which is a really good indicator of a healthy river system. Same time as we were doing that, I was doing a project pretty much just across the road from there on the Lowther estate. And I should have changed this. This will come to be known as a stage 0 project, but basically it's just a valley bottom restoration. So what we had, again, you can see the picture on my right, shows a very straight, very uniform channel. There's not really anything of interest in there. We electrofished it and all we found was sticklebacks. It was pretty much dead. Where you see the trees at the end of that straight line, the bed then does a right angle and goes under the M6, the A6, the railway, and the M6 before going into the River Leith. And we thought, well, what can we do here? So we started talking. So this is a Lowther estate, and we started talking to Lowther, and we were going to do a re-meandering project that would take that straight channel all the way down the valley. But what we decided is actually we'd let the river do the work, because there's nothing at risk in the area. There's no fish, and there's no downstream properties at risk. And the A6, M6, all of that was high up and away over there. So, none of that was at risk. It's like, well, why can't we just put the river back into the bottom of this valley and let it sort itself out? So that's what we did. And it's being monitored by Lancaster University for natural flood management as part of their, what's it called now, QNFM project. Which is just looking at how beneficial natural flood management can be. And yeah, basically all we did, is we blocked the straight channel there, and we dug this channel here just to get water into the bottom of the valley, because there were sort of artificial features in there that were actually impounding it. So we dug this little channel, just get it into the bottom of the valley. And it's become this little oasis in the middle of that field. So when everything else is dry all around it, it's green and lush in the middle. And actually, when we get heavy rainfall, you can see the huge amount of water that isn't going straight into the river system. So therefore isn't doing, as I was saying earlier, just firing straight down towards the nearest town or village. So this was it in March 21 on my right. See, they've been quite wet, and you can just see the river channel snaking away in the background, or the river channel, fallen river channel, I guess. Eventually it'll become a river channel. At the moment it's overland flow. And then on the right there, in quite a warm July, I believe that was, and it's just looking quite lush and far better than what was there before. There you go, that was the picture I was looking for, actually. So as you can see on these, the water, when it is high flow, goes all the way from the project here, all the way down through the valley, all the way down, and then it joins into it kind of feeds into a large pond that we restored at the bottom end. And by the large pond, small lake, it's about 16,000 square meters. And yeah, that's been a really nice, successful project. There's been a lot of new sort of birds spotted there, things that are around, nothing uncommon, but just things using the site that hadn't been previously using the site, like herons, like sparrowhawks and kestrels. So yeah, it's become really. I also noticed a lot of really interesting fungus down there, but I don't know enough about fungi to actually say whether they were interesting or not. There was just a lot of them. So yeah, so that was Bessie Gill. Slightly different type of project. This is 2 years ago now, so 2021. We did have the COVID in the middle didn't stop us. I think we were developing this during COVID, which was tricky. But this was again a different type of project, working with the Westmoreland Dales Landscape Partnership, and we got talking to a farmer at Crosby Ravensworth, and we were just going to do a little bit of river restoration. And they were really keen to do more, you know, especially in terms of natural flood management, storage of water on their land. So they had this approximately 60-hectare farm. It's a working farm, but they've massively downsized in terms of sheep and cattle and started to branch out. Well, actually, they started to branch out quite a long time ago. I think they're doing very well in sort of the tourism side of things. So they've got glamping pods and camping fields and things like that. There's also lots of archaeology in the surrounding area and loads of really interesting stuff going on. So it made it really interesting, but also a little bit kind of a little bit tricky, lots of things to work through. But there was lots of scope for actually storing water on the farm, restoring habitat, improving wildlife, and reducing flood risk, and actually making it better for the tourism side of it as well. So basically what we did is we created, well, we blocked a load of ditches, which then created more overland flow, slowing that flow of water down. And then we created several wetland areas. So you can see in the picture there, there's a bund and then a scrape just below it. And water comes down through those woods where we've blocked the ditch. And it comes down through those trees and it goes into that pond. And then that bund holds it back. And then as that fills up, it actually, you can see where it carries on across the field on the right-hand side there. And that flows down into another pond. And so we've got this whole system of interconnected ponds that are not only storing water, but they're also slowing that flow of water down as it's going across the fields, through the rough vegetation. We also created some in-stream habitat. So just by putting trees in the river, as I said earlier, they're vitally important for fish. The Wild Trout Trust have a brilliant saying, which I have to credit them for because it's theirs, but it's trout live in trees too, and they do. Without trees, you'd have no trout. Likewise with salmon, they need that protection. They need the invertebrates that feed off of them as a food source. You know, they need the shelter from the sun and from, yeah, just vitally important. So we put some trees in the river. They also help to slow that flow of water again and take out some sediments. And then this isn't the best photo of it, sadly. Quite hard to get a decent photo, but while the contractor was tidying up, he created these accidental artificial beaver dams, which he really liked, and then came to me, it's like, can you keep them? And I said yes, because they're brilliant. They've created these pools of more storage. Water can still get through. There's still no barrier to fish passage, but they've created these different level pools, which now store more water and again, keep everything a bit lusher. We've actually got a wildlife camera on there. I was watching a stoat running up and down one of the branches the other day. It was fantastic. What else did we do? We reconnected the floodplain, created, yeah, sorry, 9, that's actually now 10 ponds. We've made another one since this. So storing over 10,000 cubic meters of water between them, which means in total, we've managed to create 20,000 cubic meters of water storage on this farm. So that is 20 million liters. If that is easier to visualize, it's not for me. Imagine it probably more than fill this room anyway. It's very hard to. I always get asked what it is in double-decker buses, but no clue, I'm afraid. So if anyone knows how many cubic meters a double-decker bus is, I can work it out. We also restored over 600 meters of river, say through bed raising, through introducing woody habitat. Planted 800 to 1,000 trees in strategic places will again create habitat and further slow that flow of water. And oh yes, and plug plants as well. So we've plug planted and seeded all of the areas. So there's real nice diversity of plants coming through in all those wetland margins now as well. But so far, I've not really talked about Ullswater very much. And the reason for that is that me personally and Eden Rivers Trust have not done a lot of river restoration in the Ullswater area yet. There are other organisations that have. You'll all know about the National Trust Goldwell Beck project. They've also done a fantastic project over at Hartsop. There are other organisations working in the area as well. But what we did do, actually the same year as Goldwell Beck was delivered, we delivered the Grisdale Beck project. So if you, I'm going to hope that everybody knows the area pretty well, but if you don't, you carry on south from Glenridding, you get to Patterdale. Before you get to the village of Patterdale, there's a right turn that you take that will take you up to the Ullswater Valley, and then you can walk from there up to Grisdale Town and then up to Helvellyn. Actually, you can make a really nice loop that comes back through Glenridding as well. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful valley. The river, sadly, was suffering the same problem that so many of our rivers do. It had been straightened and reinforced with this very substantial revetment along here. As you can see up there, there are a couple of bends, but they're very angular artificial bends that are basically dictated by bedrock and by where the diggers could actually, and when I say diggers, the people digging these could actually dig. So again, it had really uniform substrate. So by that I mean sort of bed, gravel bed, mostly cobble bed, which meant that there's no spawning habitat for fish in there because they need gravels. You have very limited invertebrate life because you've only got one type of habitat in there. And so there was a lot we could do on this site. There was a lot we couldn't do. It was quite a tricky one. And actually, it probably got designed about 3 times before we got to the final design. And this is the final design. So it was a combination of creating habitat in the existing stream, basically because to re-meander this river back through the middle of the floodplain, I think we had a quote of something like £800,000, and the re-meandering project wouldn't have delivered any flood benefit. There's various reasons for that that are in the modelling, and it's to do with actually the connection with the floodplain. And so what we decided instead then was that maybe we improve the habitat in the existing stream as much as we can, but also reconnect that channel with its floodplain, allow the river into the floodplain to kind of start to rework it and make its own route through. And so that's what we did. We introduced a variety of different habitats down the river channel. Actually, I'm going to flick to the next one and then back to that one. So you can see here we installed some gravel bars, some riffles there further on. We also took out a lot of the bank protection and lowered the banks so that the river could much more easily access its floodplain. But more importantly than that, the thing doing most of the work here was actually a feature we created upstream, right at the top. So you can see here, it's not very easy to make out, but there's a rapid stroke riffle put in there. So it's basically raised the bed of that river so that we've split the flow 50-50. So we created a little cut through, and you can see the water coming into the floodplain through there. So that's about half the flow of the river at the time this picture was taken. And what that's done is, again, going back to what I was saying earlier about water firing in a straight line down to a bridge or whatever, that's actually pushed half of that water now into the floodplain, where it's not only slowing it down and making it take so much longer before it makes its way back into the river, It's actually also depositing a lot of sediments out in what we call gravel splays. So everywhere the river comes out and its velocity, its speed drops, it drops all the sediment it's got in suspension out. And what that does, it reduces sediment deposition at places like Rosedale Bridge, where I've been told in the past that that was quite an issue there with following Storm Desmond with deposition under the bridge. And I think the same issue with Glen Ridding, but obviously it won't help with that because it's the one back. But yeah, so by taking a lot of that sediment out of the system and by taking a lot of water out of the system, we're actually again reducing that downstream flood risk. That's longer and less water going straight down and into Goldbrook Lake. So yeah, as I said, these features have improved habitat for fish in there. I should say there is another channel that runs through here. So actually at the back, following those trees, and it joins downstream. We found when we electrofished the main river channel to survey it, sorry, electrofish is a survey method we use so that we can sort of stun, catch, count, measure, and then return the fish to the river. We found in the artificial straightened river channel, I think it was about 8 trout par, so the young trout, no adult trout, just one life-size stage, and that's because there was only one type of habitat. When we looked in the silty, overgrown, smaller ditch running out of that, we were pulling out fish that size. You know, there were, I don't know if I'm not a fisherman, that to me seems like a pretty decent sized trout. So, you know, it just goes to show that they can survive up there. There was no water quality issues. There was no other issues, nothing stopping them from surviving up there other than the lack of in-stream habitat. So this was completed, now, what year are we in? This was completed in 2021. We will go back to electrofish it. However, I should say, and this is just to prove that not everything goes according to plan, we do have to go back and make some changes to it. So the modeling and the measurements that we did were pretty good. Things were close, but actually in a couple of places, the water isn't going exactly where the modeling said it would. But that's had a knock-on effect to the farming that goes on in there. So it's made certain bits of it unfarmable. And so, you know, we're not going to leave anyone in the lurch, just walk away, go, now they're done now. So what we're doing this year is we're going back, and you can see we've come up with some new plans where we're just going to create some new channels. So top left, I mean, you can't read that, but basically we're just going to create a couple of new channels just to link up the areas where actually water is impounding and not flowing downstream. And basically what that will do is that will improve the drainage either side so that those areas are still farmable again, or are farmable again. So that we'll be doing this summer. And hopefully once that's done, it will just be allowed then to develop over time, naturalize, and just hopefully become a haven for wildlife. I should say it's quite interesting for wildlife up there at the moment. There's red squirrels, and lots of deer. That's mainly what I've seen up there, but yeah. Oh, actually, no, I've also seen stoats up there as well. Well worth a walk up there if you haven't been up there. If you do go for a walk up there, keep an eye out for our photo boards. So what we've done, and some of you helped me do this, is we've put up some fixed point photography boards that overlook the site. So as you walk around, if you're walking on the path that goes up and then up to Ruthwaite Lodge, there are 3 of them along there, but then if you do the loop back around the other side, there's another one as well. So there's 4 of them overlooking the project site. And we've got just a little sign on saying, if you're passing by here, take a photo, scan the QR code, send it in to us when you do have internet, or just email it to the address that's on the board. And then we're collecting all those into a monitoring file primarily, but we're hoping that actually once we've got a few years of that, it'll also make a really nice long-term story of how that site changes. So yeah, that's great. And we have been getting a lot of photos back, so they are quite popular, but the more the merrier. So please do take photos. Just a little bit of a brag next, really, not just for myself, but for the Cumbrian River Restoration Strategy Partnership. So because of all the work that's been going on all across Cumbria, we actually, the partnership there has won the European River Prize last year. So it's one of the sort of most prestigious conservation awards, certainly for nerds like me, that are going out there. So this was really exciting. And hopefully it will lead to better promotion, better understanding of what we're doing, and bigger and better projects ongoing. So this is all the crew on there. And we all got to go to Vienna last year, which was very nice. And that's pretty much it, to be honest. Apart from, oops, what's happened there? That one button. Told you it was going to get wrong. So big thank you to, these are just some of the people that we work with. These are the people we work with the most, really. I'm not going to read them all out, but these are all vitally important in the work that we do. There are more though. I can't name all the farmers and all the landowners on this page, but without them, we wouldn't be able to do anything. You know, people like yourselves, people out there who just support us or are interested in what we do. Again, they should all be on there as well. But yeah, unfortunately, well, as well as data protection, I don't know all their names. So, and then I'm just going to leave you now with a nice little video of the Ullswater Valley. One of the joys of my job, I just got to stand out there and fly a drone around looking at what I think is one of the most stunning valleys in the Lake District. So on that note, I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Lev. It's exciting for me because my house is maybe right. So this is my home territory, and actually it's fun because we see the changes taking place. Everyone knows we force you to take our little pictures, and I don't know how many you've received. We're still looking for hotter springs and things like that. I don't know.
No,
it's arrived yet.
I haven't seen any up there yet, but I would hope to over time. I mean, if we can improve the fish numbers up there, then there's absolutely no reason not to won't go.
Yeah,
it's still where the food is, really. Yeah, fingers crossed for that.
Any questions from the audience here? Peter is a very honored member of the Friends of the very active treasurer.
Could you tell us more about the battery?
I probably dug myself a little hole here because I'm not a biologist. However, they're just fascinating fish. So we have three different types in the UK. We've got river, brook, and sea lamprey, and they're kind of a really basic fish. So if you think they don't look like eels, but it's the easiest way to kind of describe it. So they're long and thin and wriggly, but they have a mouth on the underside, which they use to kind of suck onto things, and it's got like multiple rows of teeth inside. And I've got to be honest, that's about when my knowledge is ends, apart from the fact that most of the ones I see are like range from sort of that size to that size, but they can sort of grow to, I believe, a couple of feet long, like the sea lamprey at least. So, and if anybody knows more than that and can tell me I'm wrong, please do. I'm quite happy to be told I'm wrong and to learn something new.
Any other questions? Right.
I was interested in
Another trustee.
how the funding works, the Eden Rivers Trust. Is it project funding or you have?
Yeah.
Where does the money come?
So basically, it comes from all over the place. We have to bid into various different pots of funding. So because we don't have memberships, we don't raise any funds through memberships. So most of my work is funded through the Environment Agency and whatever match funding I can find. So that's going to other organisations, be it. So some of my work's match funded by Heritage Lottery at the moment, other bits are match funded by landowners sometimes, whereas Network Rail match funded the 3MB project. So basically, if we have a project, we then have to try and sell it. You know, we have to go to the Environment Agency and say, look, we want to deliver this, and then we have to see who else will be interested in that project, who might benefit from it, or who's keen to see it happen, and see whether they will help to match fund it. Other projects, so we've got our Access to Eden project that we're starting at the moment, which is about improving access to the catchment for people and for wildlife. So that's a Heritage Lottery Fund project, and but it's match funded again by a whole range of different organisations. Basically, we've got to beg, borrow, and steal from wherever we can to deliver what we want to do. Is pretty much the long and short of it, really. But there are a lot of good organisations out there that are willing to fund and help fund projects.
Right. Thanks.
So,
I should have said that for our Zoomers, they won't hear the question. So the question was about funding, obviously. And just to pick that up, I mean, do you have, I have no idea what sort of flows of money you have coming into the system and permanent employees and so on, but do you think the environment is now more favourable for funding of this type of project than it has been recently, or is it plateaued? I know there's a lot of talk in the press about trying to raise more awareness and so on. Is it?
I would say at the I would say at the moment, no, it's not there yet. I think there's a lot more organisation, there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline, but I don't know, I'm not seeing a massive difference on the ground yet in terms of, and that isn't meant to be disparaging to all the people that do fund this. But yeah, I haven't seen a massive change or improvement in that at the moment. But I do think it's coming. There's various things happening in terms of biodiversity net gain and nutrient neutrality, which are going to lead to additional funding in this kind of sector, I think. So, yeah.
The other question I was going to ask was about education. And I know you talked about a citizen science project. Yeah. Do you have links with schools and colleges and so on in this area?
Yeah.
So extended education an important part of the work.
Yes, so we've got so my colleague Tanya, who works very closely with schools across the catchment and has been working with teachers as well to improve learning about rivers, and she does loads of great stuff with schools across the catchment. We also, in terms of education, we got obviously going out to talks and events and things like that, and trying to just bring a little bit of that to those. So we'll do things like river dipping, and as I said, we'll be going to Open Farm Sunday next week and talking to people about the life in the River Leith. I don't know how much we do with colleges. I've had a few college groups come out with me as and Jenny, our volunteer coordinator, for tree planting and sort of habitat works. But in terms of college education, actually no, it's not. We used to, when Newton Rig was going, we used to do quite a lot working with Newton Rig. But that's kind of not really my department, so I don't want to talk about what I don't know about, I'm afraid. But obviously with Newton Rig having closed on that kind of thing.
Neil, I've got a question here.
I was going to say, well, like to see that you're still recognized in Europe. No, that's my mind.
For our Zoomers, you just mentioned it was nice to see that we are still recognized in Europe.
Did you Do you monitor projects which other organizations have undertaken, like the RSPB?
Do you work with other
I would say
organizations such as the RSPB?
Yes, yeah. So we'll work with them. So I don't monitor other people's projects because hopefully they've incorporated that monitoring into their budgeting, which is the same as we have to do. Having said that, I did go and do some monitoring for the RSPB on their Swindale Beck project, and I'd be, you know, we help each other out. If I can help them out and they can help me, you know, we're all going for the same thing.
I'm just going to take a Zoom question if we can.
Yes, there's a question from the Zoomers. What's the Trust's thoughts on the possibility of beavers helping the restoration work in the future?
I'm only laughing because it's been a long time since I've done a talk and not been asked about beavers. I was waiting for it. So yeah, I mean, basically, we're all in favour of beavers, and we know that the good that they can do, we know the habitats they can restore, the wildlife they can bring back. That's not to say that there aren't concerns. We know that there's going to end up being conflicts. We need to make sure there's decent management strategies in place. But yeah, so far, I've yet to see any evidence that having beavers back will be anything but good. That's my own opinion. The official trust is that, again, we are in favour, but we will watch the science and we will watch the research and we will carry on doing so, and we'll be guided by that, as I think most people, I think is the best way to go. So if it turns out they're bad, then we'll be against them at that point. Yeah.
I have a question for Veronica.
My question was really in relation to how you get your message out there, because in a way here you're preaching to the converted. And I was thinking about the research that you said Lancaster University involved in, and what the changes are, not just to the fish in the river, but the whole habitat in terms of the flora and fauna, insect life, bird life, all of the sort of whole range of things that change because you re-meandered the river. So you've done one thing, but you have a huge impact on the habitat, the whole of the habitat. And so it's a bit about the research and how much that is disseminated.
So, well, the specific bit of Lancaster University research is specifically looking at the natural flood management value of it. So it's not really looking at any of the other changes, it's just looking at how much water is being stored or slowed down and what benefits that can have. Sadly, one of the biggest issues we have is there's not a lot of money out there for monitoring. And so we do what we can. So we will do regular sort of fish surveys, crayfish surveys, and we will try to do habitat surveys of one sort or another. So these days, that's basically come to sort of fixed point photography and drone imagery because they're really good for showing changes. But yeah, how we get that message out there, I mean, that's it's a massive question, really. So there's I think one of the most important things we do in the most important ways of getting that out there is the schools education that we do, because if we can teach the next generation to care about rivers, then actually, hopefully, we won't need to do a lot more about them, because if they care, then they'll look after them. But I think that's the most important thing. But we go where we can. We will go and give talks. We have events. We sort of, again, a lot of preaching to the converted, but try and put a lot of information out there at sort of conferences on a more national sort of level, so that we can get other people sort of input from other areas. And when we can, we also get students, so ideally PhD students or master's students, who will come and do research projects for us. Disseminating that is not as easy as delivering it. It's great, we can learn from it, but then getting that out there, because there's only think there's 12 of us. No, I don't think there's only 12 of us that work at the trust. No, you can count that far. And you know, we're all kind of pretty full on our roles, and we try and do what we can where we can. But yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world. And I should say that sounds like I'm massively underselling my colleagues, by the way. They do a fantastic job. So we have our farm advisors who go out working with landowners to make improvements on farm and talk about how they can benefit wildlife and how they can store more water, actually save money and benefit things. So, you know, we take stuff like what we know and we actually take it out onto the ground and talk to people about that. Again, other organizations as well quite often come to us for talks and contractors and things like that. Actually educating the contractors that we work with has brilliant knock-on effects, because they start to worry about things that they wouldn't have worried about before. So yeah, I guess it sounds a little bit haphazard, but actually I guess the more I'm saying it, the more I'm thinking we do more, you know, more than I think we do on the face of it, I think. Actually leads me quite nicely onto another thing I was going to say, which is on the 17th of June, we're having our Supporters Day event, which is a free event. It's at Molesmeaven Village Hall, but there's loads of talks in the morning and then a variety of guided walks in the afternoon. And that's free. So if anybody's interested in coming along, learning more about what we do, going and having a look at. We've got our tree nursery. Sorry, I haven't mentioned that, and you guys work on it really hard. So, you know, where we've been working with volunteers to sort of create a base of trees that we can then use to future planting projects. So yeah, there's guided tour going on the Thrimby Grange project. So, you know, there's loads of interesting talks and walks. So if anybody's interested in that, go to our website, which is just Eden Rivers, www. I should know this, shouldn't I? It's all the way at the beginning. Oh, there it is, EdenRiversTrust.org. Yes, there we go, to the bottom of that. Actually, while I'm talking about events, we've also got another event going on actually on Ullswater. So this is a ticketed event. It's called Cocktails and Canapes. So it's a little cocktail party on one of the steamers. So there's some leaflets over on the table there if anybody's interested in that. There you go, I've got those bits.
Are there any more questions from the Zoomers?
No, thank you.
Gordon?
I have a question, yes. I mean, the key to rolling this out is motivating the landowners, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what can you do, what can we do, what can the government do to incentivize landowners to adopt more projects?
Well, without wading into a political argument that other people do a far better job of than me, the government can pay what things are worth. You know, if we want actual habitat improvements and biodiversity improvements on farms, then that's going to have to be paid for, and it's going to have to be paid for at a rate that makes it worth people doing it. But that's as much I'm going to say about that bit, because yeah, there's other people who can argue about that far more eloquently than I can. But actually, what I've found is actually, once you get into the dialogue, it's talking about, well, what the benefits are, what the potential negatives are, you know, and then having a conversation. And sometimes that means that you both sides compromise a little and you meet in the middle and you get some gains. Sometimes you get a landowner that's full on, I want to do it all, and you know, just because they just get it. And other times you just, you know, even if somebody's not massively, it's hard to argue. Most people don't dislike birds, for example. So you can always say, well, how about planting a few trees? And it's having the discussions, I think, and understanding what the problems are going to be and what the benefits could be. And it's different for every single farmer and landowner that I deal with. So it's quite hard to generalize that. And I just realized that's such a vague answer to your question. Sorry. Yeah. I think.
One last question from the floor, yeah? please.
Have you had to recorrect footpaths when you realised?
I've only had to do that once, where it was a bridle way. And that was on the Bessie Gill project that I was talking about here, but it was actually where we restored the pond. So the pond lake thing is that reflecting that body of water just behind those trees at the top. So where on one of my other presentations, I've got a slide that shows this, but basically the bridleway went straight through the middle of the pond. Now there was a much smaller pond there anyway, and the bridleway went through the middle of that. And so when we created the bigger pond, we rerouted it up and around the outside, but that made it more useful for everybody. It was usable all year round. But we did have to go through a load of processes to get it done. So, you know, it cost money and time, and that was really no argument against it, you know. So some of them can be more contentious. On the Crate Trees project, we didn't actually have to redirect the right of way, but we did, yeah, no, again, it was not, but basically we had to, one of the bungs we created was where the public right of way was. So we had to make it in a way that made it still perfectly usable for bikes and horses and everything else. So yeah, I do try to avoid rerouting them if I can, because it's just, yeah.
Speaking of footpaths, we've had some exchanges as well, I think, with your CEO on Emont Way. You're probably aware that one of the projects that we've been working on with a range of different organisations, some in this region, is to try to create the Emont Way, which we succeeded in doing a few weeks ago. We had an inauguration. There's still a debate out there about whether we can extend that way. I think Cecilia knows more about this issue than myself. So I see all sorts of synergies in working with the organisation. Maybe at that note, I'll just ask you a question which I planted prior to the talk, and as you know, it's any donations we get from this talk, 50% will go to Friends of the Ullswater Valley, 50% to a charity nominated by yourself. Maybe you could.
It will be to Eden Rivers Trust, but it will go to it will actually be specifically for the Access to Eden project.
Okay.
So as I say, working on improving those footpaths and that access and things. So yeah, any donations will go specifically towards that.
Thank you very much. Well, maybe I'll now just ask Gordon to give us sort of word of thanks as the chair and Friends of the Ullswater Valley for your talk tonight.
Well, this evening for me started off as a bit of a disappointment because I actually thought I had the best job in the world. But it turns out I've only got the second best job. So, and by all accounts, Lev, that seems to be the case because it's very interesting and very worthwhile work that you're doing. Yeah, I suppose I asked the question about what will motivate people to do this, and obviously it's government, it's ourselves, it's motivating the landowners, and it's education. You know, I mean, when I was at Newbury many moons ago, too many to 40 years ago, nature never had a voice, and because nature never had a voice, the farmers never listened. Well, there's nothing to listen to. Of course, you know, farmers were incentivized to produce more and more, which is how we got all these rivers and streams straightened in the first place, long before my time. And so, you know, and speaking as an ex-farmer, you know, I think farmers now are becoming much more conscious that it's time to give back to nature, to give back its voice. And hopefully talks like this and expanding upon that, and particularly selling what the benefits are or what the benefits could be. Of course, we've got public money for public goods project, you know, which is being fed into Farnham, albeit too slow, and it's dreadfully slow at the speed it's going, working on that. But hopefully, you know, you can encourage yourselves to get out more and tell the farmers where the benefits could be for them. And also, there's an army of citizen scientists behind who would help them do that and do it voluntarily as well. So I think that's kind of really the message. We look forward to inviting them back in a couple of years' time to tell them about what other projects he's done, and hopefully projects that will involve some more of us here. I think we have most of the trustees here tonight, Friends of the Ullswater Way. Given that it's going to be Eamont, the River Eamont project, is that right?
Well, access.
Access even, but on, yeah.
Well, I don't know if it was specifically for the email bit, but it can be.
But in terms of potentially linking up to the Eamont, then if would we all be in agreement that 100% of the monies go to Eden Rivers Trust this evening? Quick show of hands from the trustees. So I think that's all right. We look forward to working with you on future projects. So we can just show our appreciation in the traditional way.